He also supports President Biden's extreme open borders amnesty agenda. At Judge Garland's confirmation hearing, he was asked if entering the country illegally should be a crime. You would think that would be a very simple question. But Judge Garland responded that he hadn't thought about it. It stretches the bounds of belief that a federal judge who has been on the bench for almost a quarter century hadn't thought about that question. Or that any American with common sense who believes in our borders and believes in our sovereignty hadn't thought whether it should be a crime to cross our border illegally. But to give him the benefit of the doubt, I asked in a written question after the hearing. Had nearly a week to think about it. Seems like it's a pretty easy research question. Should illegally entering our country be a crime? And he said conveniently, even then, that he hadn't thought about it. Judge Garland also refused to say whether illegal alien gang members or illegal aliens who have assaulted U.S. citizens should be deported if a judge orders it. Judge Garland's silence shows that he will, at best, meekly abide by the administration's irrational immigration agenda. He will help transform zero tolerance into total tolerance of crime, and his inaction will only further advance the administration's recruit and release policies at our border, where we don't just allow illegal aliens into our country after catching them at the border. We go back and find them in Mexico, invite them to return to the border, and then release them into the country. This will attract an ever-growing surge of illegal migration and will result in more drugs and criminal aliens entering our country, as we see with the Biden border crisis growing worse every day. Of course, the vast majority of meth, heroin, and cocaine, and a large quantity of fentanyl is smuggled across the southern border each year. As our border facilities and personnel are overwhelmed by the Biden border surge, our security will falter and even more drugs will pour into our nation. Hardened criminals will accompany the flood of drugs from the Rio Grande. Thousands of confirmed and suspected gang members cross the southern border into our country, and even more will exploit the open border policies that Judge Garland will have a hand in creating. This will fuel skyrocketing violence in our nation. Last year, we experienced the largest single increase in murder in American history, the largest single increase in murders in our country's history. Preliminary data from the FBI indicates that there was a 20% increase in murder nationwide. In big cities, it was even worse. Murders rose in Atlanta by 60%, in Chicago by 50%, in New York City by 45%, and in Washington, D.C. by 40%. There were also, I would add, over 500 violent riots last year that injured over 2,000 law enforcement officers. Our police need our support more than ever before, but they wouldn't get it from a Garland Department of Justice. Personnel is policy, and Judge Garland has allowed 2 left-wing radicals to be selected as his chief lieutenants in the Department of Justice. Vanita Gupta and Kristen Clark both support defunding, disarming, and defaming our police. They stand with the perpetrators of crime, not with the victims of it. There's little doubt that Judge Garland will empower these left-wing radicals embedded inside the department. In response to written questions from the Judiciary Committee, Judge Garland also responded with some variation of, I don't know, I haven't studied the issue, I'm not familiar, I haven't thought about it, I'm not aware of, or refused to comment altogether over 250 times. Again, this is a sitting federal judge of almost a quarter century with a vast retinue of the country's best lawyers at his disposal for a week to answer written questions, and over 250 times he couldn't answer the question. That was in more than a third of the questions that I and my colleagues asked him. Judge Garland may not have thought about these questions or thought about how to run the Justice Department, but I bet Ms. Gupta and Ms. Clark have, and they'll gladly fill this void of purpose with their radical ideology. The Garland Justice Department will make America less safe. And at the same time, Judge Garland would work to weaken our Second Amendment. At his hearing, he repeatedly refused to explain how he would deal with the Second Amendment. While he acknowledged accurately that it would be tough to overturn the Supreme Court's ruling in Washington, D.C. versus Heller, which affirmed Americans' constitutional right to keep and bear arms under the Second Amendment, he said that he can't promise that he won't try to overturn it. He also said he just doesn't know whether President Biden has the authority to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, some of the most popular sporting firearms today. He doesn't know if President Biden has the authority to ban them by executive order. He's also said he's just not familiar with whether the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, which would report to him if he's confirmed, I would remind everyone, would have the authority to indefinitely delay approving gun sales to Americans who have not had any flags show up in their background checks. Once again, Judge Garland demonstrated through his evasion that he would bow to the radical left to the detriment of normal, law-abiding American citizens. So I urge every senator who believes in the Second Amendment and the rule of law and who cares about stopping crime in our streets to reject Judge Merrick Garland's nomination for Attorney General. Now is not the time for weakness, evasion, and obfuscation from our nation's foremost law enforcement officer. We need strength, resolve, and certainty. Our nation needs and deserves a better nominee for Attorney General. I will oppose his nomination. Mr. President, I yield the floor.